Hey everyone, welcome to our latest Move Monday. This is the first time for me actually running the meeting because Max usually is here, but he's very busy today. So I will be running the meeting. So let's go around and do introductions today. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Perry. I'm a production engineer at Aptos.
Hey, David. As you know, I don't do much of anything these days except show up on Move Mondays and give random answers on Discord and other mediums. So happy to be here.
I'm Alex. I write Move code.
And I'm Greg. I also give lots of random messages and answers in Discord and work here at Aptos, an engineer. And we also have Nick here from Topaz on the line today to give us a talk about Topaz.
We probably need to slow down a little bit because right now nobody's in the
yes, actually let's
now it's at 34, so let's slow it down a little bit. We'll give you guys about 2 minutes to cycle in. We will do our best to invoke the spirit of Max in the meantime. We hear that some people out there have grandmothers, their grandmothers have girlfriends, their girlfriends have husbands, and they might be also dating on the side. And so all of those people are more than welcome to apply for jobs at Aptos. We are a very open and welcome company with roles across the board, including ecosystems, BD, production engineering, software engineering. We'd like to get more security engineers. We'd like to get basically, if you got a pulse, we probably got a job for you. So head over to our careers page, apply, let us know about you.
That's aptoslabs.com, aptoslabs.com.
aptoslabs.com/careers.
/careers, you're right. It's been a while since I looked at it.
Over the coming weeks, we hope to really start interviewing more and bringing in more fresh bodies.
You also reminded me about slowing down, as I think I'm talking too fast for our non-native English speakers, so I will try to slow down my speaking for that. Thank you.
Indeed. And so today, just to give a little precursor as we have people slowly funnel in, we've got several things to talk about. We've got obviously Nick here from Topaz. In addition, we'll be going over some of the release changes. We also had a couple of breaking changes that we rolled in over the past few week or so. So we'll talk about why we're doing that, what the ramifications of that are. Also looking for feedback. So obviously in the Twitch stream, let's talk about that. As some of you may have noticed, there was a surprise update to Testnet on Friday. So we're going to talk about both the upgrade processes for Testnet, as well as that for mainnet, so that you folks can get familiar with how we do things. And I think there was, obviously we have the Q&A. I don't know if there was one other topic that we wanted to go through today.
I think that was it.
Just loading up my various different things.
Yeah.
Oh, and we've got Perry here, of course, to talk about our firewalls, which I think is a super exciting topic. So I think we've got 55. Actually, we'll wait for more people to get in, and so we'll just start with some of the easier topics, and then we'll wait for a large audience for Topaz to talk about what's going on in that space. So just some early things. Perry, do you want to run us through some of the updates on Testnet and DevNet, or do you want to go straight into the firewall?
We can talk about the firewall. Basically, you may have seen the DevNet release was slightly rocky a couple times. We were trying to roll out this new configuration for HA proxy. Basically, it just provides some layer of security around the validators in the core of the network to make sure that there's a border, like a kind of a border baseline level of security around the network to make sure that you can't just abuse these machines and take them down with simple brute force attacks.
Cool. Well, we're some of the learnings in the deployment, because it seemed like we went through 3 iterations of it, or maybe even a couple more than that. It's hard to keep track.
Yes, third time's the charm. I think the lessons learned from this are how important testing is and how different the real world can be from what you're testing. So although even after the first time we attempted to reproduce in a test environment, we were unable to pin down exactly how to reproduce. And finally, we were successful because we were able to pin down and reproduce exactly the scenario that was happening in production. And then we're able to solve it in a smaller environment and then push forward. There are still potentially some things that could happen. I mean, the behavior in the network is very complex, but at least right now it functions.
Yeah, and just for that sake, one thing that I want to call out is obviously in both testnet and devnet, these are areas for us to be trying to roll out some of these experiences. In the short term, it might be somewhat painful for folks building on top of the networks, but in the longer term, this is what's going to help sustain the network as there's more and more interested folks in the space. Just to give you an example, I don't know how many people on the call are familiar with when we first launched Aptos, having close to 20,000 or so full nodes attempting to connect to just 20 or 30 upstream nodes. And that was a substantial load because in Aptos, you're basically streaming across all the traffic that has occurred up to that point in time. And so that can be sustained megabytes per second per node. And so fortunately back then, it was able to handle that load, but that's also a substantial cost to all those upstream nodes. Fortunately, we've been blessed to be able to afford quite a bit of that. But the reality is for partners, they might not be able to scale up to having 100 or 1,000 full nodes connected directly to their nodes. And so these configurations substantially help rate limit and improve overall accessibility into the network for folks that are able to get in there and to balance things out, and also to call out where we probably need to add more nodes and enable that process. So very excited to have this in place.
Yeah, it's great for us to get an idea of and also find ways to detect these earlier. So there were a lot of good alerts I know that came out of this deployment in DevNet that will be applicable in testnet or mainnet.
Awesome.
Well, thanks, Perry, for giving us the update on the firewall and everything. Should we move on then to our guest speaker for today?
Yeah, Nick, are you there and ready to go?
Ready.
Awesome. So quick intro. This is Nick, the father of Topaz, an amazing NFT marketplace on Aptos. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Would you like to give a little bit of background on
Yeah,
who you are, why an NFT marketplace? Why Aptos?
Yeah, I can give background on myself. I can talk about why I'm so excited about Aptos and sort of the community that is sort of building around it. First off, it's great to be here with all of you. I'm not used to waking up this early and getting in front of a bunch of people and doing a call, but it's worth it for this opportunity. But yeah, I've been in the Aptos ecosystem since I guess June or July, and it's sort of been so hard meeting so many smart, giving, kind people. There's so many people that are volunteering in the Discord, answering endless questions, sometimes the same question over and over again. And it's just amazing, seeing the amount of help that people are willing to give back and just help out onboard people into the ecosystem. And it really does feel like there's something special, and it sort of is this family that's building around it. And it's been really great to see. But my background is I'm a software engineer. I come from the startup fintech world, and what I sort of saw was the way that, at least in the US, how the financial infrastructure is pretty awful, and it ends up hurting the most vulnerable people. In the US, just to send money to people can take 3 to 5 business days. There's overdraft fees, which will end up hurting the people that are the most vulnerable. A lot of people don't understand this unless you're either in this situation or working on problems to solve it, where a lot of people, just to catch their paycheck, end up having to pay fees, or they'll have to even pay their bills, they'll just be really struggling. And that's something specifically I think about crypto and Aptos, which has opportunity to solve, and not just in the US, but sort of globally. I'm just most familiar with the challenges of the US financial infrastructure. But it's sort of why I got so excited into crypto. And you're probably oh, okay, why are you building an NFT marketplace? But real quick, I don't know if anyone who's listening is familiar with Magic Online or Magic Cards. It's this trading card game that you could play. It's been around forever. But I remember when I was a kid, you could sort of play it online on Magic Online, and there were sort of two ways you could play. You could either build your decks, or you could go and trade. And I remember even as a kid, like the thing that was more exciting to me was trading. And there were sort of two ways you could trade. You could like go into this message board, and you can post what cards that you have. And then people would click it, and you're dropped into this real-time chat where you could see their collection, they could see your collection, and you could sort of haggle there and chat. And then there were others where there'd be like these live chat rooms with like hundreds of people, and they'd be an informal like auction barker who you would DM, and you'd be like, oh, I have these 12 booster packs, see how much money you can get. And then they'd go into the chat room and be yelling like, these 12 booster packs, $5, $6, $7. And I remember just being like this really exciting organic communities would form around like this idea of trading. And that's sort of what you see with NFTs. But that was in 2002, 2003. And if you jump forward 20 years, you can see like the way that people end up building these communities and trading, and the state of current marketplaces is you go and there's like a long list of just NFTs. There's no really real-time aspect. There's no social aspect. There's no organic communities that form around on the actual marketplace where like the activities are happening. But it ends up being in all these disparate places like Twitter DMs, Discord, and Discord's a very scary place. There's a lot of scams happening there. So if we could get people off of that, that'd be great. But yeah, and it just got me thinking about NFTs and like Topaz, and like how we can enable these like organic communities to form around it and be this space where people talk about the metaverse a lot, and usually it's kind of silly. But where I think the metaverse kind of is in experiences like Fortnite, where there is a game and people are playing the game, but they're sort of just hanging out with their friends. It's like an excuse to hang out. And that's sort of what I see for Topaz or trading that are happening in communities now, where the actual NFT trading is a thing. It's sort of an excuse to hang out with your friends. And that's why I'm thinking about like Topaz from like, this real time first. But yeah, like you can go to Topaz even now, we're not even on mainnet yet. All the collections update in real time. You can see all the events happening, and it inherently feels like this more social experience when you see everything updating in real time. We even pushed out a feature the other day that you can toggle it on and see other people's cursors. So you can like even without chat, you can like without words, you can actually like you could see people like starting to communicate with each other with their cursors and moving them around, and it's really exciting. And was able to build a lot in the past couple of months, and I think a big part of that is because of the move language. Like it really does feel different. I'll be positive and say move is very good compared to other crypto paradigms, I would say. But I just remember like when I was a kid and I learned JavaScript and how you could like make an alert box pop up on the screen and it felt like magic. And that's sort of how I felt as soon as I started playing around with Move. And I'm like, all the cool, innovative things are going to be built on Move and Aptos, and we have no idea what it's going to be. But I'm like really, really excited about it. And it's so obvious once people start playing around with it that like the next big thing, the thing that captures the imagination of the next billion users is going to be dreamt up, and it's going to be built on Aptos. And then Topaz is going to figure out some way to integrate with it. Yeah, that's my spiel. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, so I would say right now the Topaz marketplace contracts probably have the most features of any of the other marketplaces on Aptos right now, and like sort of thinking through the plan to fully source all of it. Also, I've been talking with the Aptos Labs team about this idea of building some type of marketplace contracts into the core framework, which is super exciting because it'll allow us to have this very standardized, easily indexed events, and have the ability to have permissionless listing, and then have more. I lost my train of thought, but that's because I haven't had enough coffee yet. But
yeah, I've actually got a few questions, and I don't know if you're prepared for this, so you can just say, just go to the website. But do you actually have a demo that you like to run through for Topaz, just to give the audience kind of an idea what's cool about Topaz, like what sets it apart from other NFT marketplaces?
Yeah, I mean, I would go to the website. I don't have like a video on hand, but like high level, all the things you would expect from a modern NFT marketplace, like exist. What I'm really excited about right now, there's a bunch of stuff in the works, but what I'm excited about right now is that everything, it happens in real time. So if you buy something, there's no need to refresh, which happens on other chain marketplaces. You just have these stale listings where maybe you try to buy something and then it fails because that is not actually listed, which is a pretty awful experience. And it's also like there's no reason for things to not be full time, like real time first. Or like when a really hype, exciting mint is happening, you could see like Topaz listing all of the NFTs immediately as it's happening, and you can see the collection feed just get populated. Yeah, and like someone updates the price, it updates immediately. If someone buys it, it goes away. I'm thinking about what kind of fun experiences we could add. Maybe we have confetti that explodes. Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you make those refresh callbacks based on event emissions?
I mean, going to the technical details, when there's updated data, it gets pushed to the front end via webhooks. But yeah, I'll go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I think one of the things that when we talked earlier that you mentioned is actually building out your own indexer. And so I'm kind of curious what you prioritize in that space, how you've, productionized that, whether or not you open source it, what you're excited about it, and what your concerns of maintaining your own indexer are. Just kind of giving a layout of what it means to build indexers, because I think that's an area that's particularly important to the broader community, because even at the Aptos Labs indexer is still a work in development, and the other aspect is the reality is, and saying too much, but hard to stop myself, is one of the things that I find particularly really interesting about indexing data is if you don't know what your data is or what the purpose of the data, it's really hard to just say, here's data. You can't contextualize data without knowing how you're trying to contextualize it. So I'm kind of curious how you're kind of working through these different aspects of building out an indexer. Yeah,
really, really good question. I'd say the main thought process around building out the own indexer is just the ability to like move a little quicker. I think in the long run, it'd be great to work with the Aptos Labs, the official one. The other point is we have different challenges than say the main one, which ideally the constraint there is you want to index everything, which is pretty challenging. You don't want to skip stuff. But for Topaz, like we only need to index NFT related events, or maybe there's a couple other contracts maybe we'll be watching in the future. So we have more flexibility there. And then also it's okay for Topaz to say, hey, if your collection name is the entire contents of Moby Dick, then we are not going to list you on Topaz, which maybe you can't do with the official one. Or like if you put a null byte into your token name, we're just not going to list you maybe. Or there's other things like that where we can ignore certain NFT collections or data that people come up with creative ways to destroy. I saw a token named Drop Tables, which is pretty fun. It didn't work, but it was pretty funny. Hopefully that answers a little bit. Yeah, I can also go into the sort of the tech stack of how it works too, but it's not terribly exciting. but it works.
Yeah, I guess the last question I'll ask you in that realm is, Aptos can handle really, really high TPS. Will your indexer be able to scale up with thousands of potential transactions per second? Or is that those areas where you're like, Aptos allows to get your indexer out quickly, so we actually have something that can scale and match to the velocity of the blockchain?
Yeah, it depends on what the max is, but yeah, it's already indexing like thousands of TPS per second. Like that'd be fine. If it was like 50,000, maybe we'd have different challenges. But
you're also doing selective parsing on, I imagine, NFTs, so you can easily skip over transactions that don't affect NFTs.
Yeah, exactly. And then we talked, the way that it works is it pulls the HTTP endpoint, and if we skip through that, then it could probably go a lot faster as well.
Awesome. So I guess one thing, just give you an opportunity. I think up until recently, you've been a one-man wrecking crew. I think you just mentioned that you just started with another person joining recently. Are you looking to hire, or do you want to put out a plug out there for bringing more people in?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I was about to ping y'all this week because we have 2 or 3 more people that accepted offers and can share more details. Yeah, the biggest challenge there is when mainnet, and we're closer. Autumn is closer now, so it's easier to start scaling up the team. But yeah, please, if you're a dev, if you're a designer, and you're like really excited about NFTs and like pushing this, not just making a clone of what's existed before, but like being creative and building something new, pushing the space forward, please DM the Topaz Twitter. You could also, DM me on Twitter. We'll get on Telegram. We'd love to chat with you. It's at Topaz Market.
Nice. And I'll ask you at least one last question from myself. So you've been actively developing in both the applications on top of Aptos as well as in the Move space. What type of feedback can you give us so that we can go in and like try to improve either the developer experience or just the Move development experience, or even just smart contracts that would help accelerate your ability to build?
That's a really good question. I haven't really thought about it too much. Things change so much that I just sort of expect it. I'm assuming after mainnet, the pace, there won't be as many breaking changes, but I think
that's the record.
I would say maybe the official indexer, there's a couple feature flags that'd be helpful. Like being like specific for us, like, hey, I don't necessarily care about the right set changes, or maybe all of the events, like being able to only index token data as a flag. Last time I looked, there was a way to index everything and token data, but it'd be cool to only index token data. I honestly, I've been sort of blown away working in Move, having like, it's like the meme where we're hiring someone with 7 years of Move experience. Like I have 3 months of Move experience, but still was able to like ship all the marketplace features. And my expectation there is once more devs start coming on and playing around with it, especially when mainnet hits, we're going to see like an explosion of like amazing developer tools. I think it's really going to capture the imagination of like other devs and just people who are like new to programming and want to play around with it. And I think that's where really cool things happen. And it's why I'm so excited about Aptos.
Cool. Any other question?
There's one question from the Twitch. Is Topaz open source platform?
Not right now, but the plan is to fully open source all the contracts.
Cool. Any other questions for Nick?
When token?
That's always the question. Anyway, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us, for building on top of Aptos. Really excited to have you guys there on mainnet with everybody else.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Have a good one.
Take care.
All right, so moving along, I think we had two other things to go through. The first one to just kind of walk through upgrades, framework upgrades, testnet upgrades. And so, so normally in our processes, as you know, we have rolling updates to move. And we also have rolling updates to the blockchain. And oftentimes these bring new features, gas changes. One that's still kind of pending is if you look at move, there's a notion of a friend, and a friend should effectively be a private function and therefore not held to the same constraints of upgradability as, say, a public function. However, where we sit today, that is actually being feature gated. And so right now, a public friend function or friend function is effectively unupgradable, unchangeable. You have to keep it there forever. We have a change in there that would actually allow people to delete friend functions because, again, they are private to the package. And so that right now that's being feature gated. We have other features that we could expose. Storage gas costs were also released via features. And so as we roll out these changes, I think, just to give one other example, we have crypto stuff that Aline was here last week that talked about. Those will also be rolled out to the blockchain eventually. And all of these are going to be behind feature gates, and we'll have to update the framework as well as the software to get there. So what is the end-to-end process for doing this? And obviously this can take many shapes or forms. And so I'll just give you the generalized process where you imagine we have software updates in the node, as well as framework updates that match to those software updates. So let's take an example such as when we're ready to roll out some of these advanced cryptography functions. And so what the team will do, or should I say the community, the organization, the entity, the ecosystem will do is we'll say, here is some code that we would like to go and deploy on the network. And so this may come as a proposal from Aptos Labs saying, here's a node binary that we believe is valuable, provides value. We'd ask people to potentially upgrade. People would choose whether or not they want to upgrade that. And we'd wait for, a substantial number of entities to go and actually update that software. The ideal scenario would be all validators have updated, as well as a substantial number of full nodes. And at this point in time, we could potentially roll out a framework update. But before rolling out the framework update, we obviously would go through various different internal tests to make sure that there's forwards and backwards compatibility as much as possible so that we don't end up taking down the network. We'd also have to put that up for proposal again. And we actually have an on-chain governance platform where you go and say, I want to make this change to the network. This then goes in, has to be voted on by all token holders that are actively in the staking system. So these are active validators or owners of staking pools. They would then have the opportunity to look at the proposed governance changes, whether these be framework updates or just configuration changes, and validate whether or not they feel like this is a good change for the ecosystem. Likewise, they can download those locally, validate that the code actually does as anticipated, apply it to a local node, and validate that, oh, this upgrade works. This upgrade gives me the features that I'm looking for. Do their own security auditing if they so desire. At which point, then they should ideally vote on chain, and assuming that there's I think it's 50% plus one votes in favor, then the upgrade can actually go through and can be applied onto the network. I think it's about 7 days after the changes have come across. And so that is the end-to-end process of which we do upgrades. Now, what happened on Friday night was a small gaffe, so to say, in which we are actually leveraging the testnet upgrade process, which we were validating that we could take an existing testnet or simulation of testnets running on a local machine and running it through the various steps to say, okay, I've applied each upgrade, it's working seamlessly. And during that process, it turned out we were not actually applying to a local node, we were actually applying to the live testnet. So that was one thing that we've now identified to make sure that when we have keys on a machine, that we separate the keys into different compartments so that a local test will never be having access to the testnet keys. So then the next thing that we also identified was there had actually been introduced a breaking change into the code base in our regression test, which should have ideally identified it, didn't identify it. And so the team's going to circle back and identify, one, how that change got into space. Now, in a normal end-to-end validation where we're testing this out locally, we would have identified that there was a breaking change. We would have analyzed that and we would have actually gone and not applied that change directly to testnet. We would have actually removed whatever was breaking from that change set and made progress with the framework upgrade, and then waited for enough nodes to catch up with the update so that we could release those feature changes that were resulting in nodes no longer being able to execute. I think, yeah, so just to kind of walk through where we landed at was, fortunately, we have an amazing community that once they found out that they had to apply a node update, quickly woke up from their slumber. I think several people were actually in European time zones that were long since asleep and very surprised to see the network was offline. They simply just said, hey, what's the right commit hash that we should be applying in our nodes? And I think it was within 30 minutes that enough stake had actually come online with the updated node version, and we were off to the races again. And so what was a planned upgrade for Saturday became a emergency upgrade for Friday night. And so won't happen again. We have the right procedures in place. We're going to be also kicking off a website so folks can actually follow along for testnet upgrades in the meantime. And also moving forward, probably towards the end of the month of October, we'll actually be having testnet upgrades go through a framework similar to how we plan to do it on mainnet, where it actually will go through the governing body or those entities that are inside the validator set on testnet to validate that these are actual processes that we'd like to follow. And so bringing in much more process will hopefully bring in more awareness about the really cool things that are happening inside the move space, reduce the number of surprises, and also help maintain the sanctity and the value of the uptime of the network. And so, we'll be documenting this, sharing out some clarity in the space in the coming weeks, probably week. And so folks feel free to give feedback, suggestions. This is a community project. We are definitely looking to make sure that input is well received and handled appropriately. So thanks everyone for helping and supporting the testnet. So that is there, and I don't think that we have any questions about that one. And I think we went through everything that we had in terms of content, except for now the Q&A.
So should I go through the questions from the Twitch?
Yeah, I think there was one that I also got here. Let's see, yeah. Trying to circle back where that one was.
Well, we can continue first with
Yeah.
one from Alnoki here. Are event emissions assessed storage gas costs for per item creation? If not, what are they assessed?
I would suspect you probably know the answer to that question better than us.
That was one I could not reverse engineer. That's what my best guess is that it's per item creation, which is by far the most expensive thing in this schedule, but see anywhere in the VM if it's assess that or something else.
Okay, well let's look back on that one. You're probably the foremost gas expert outside of the people that are actually doing the gas engineering themselves.
What is the best, once again, okay, what is the best way to compare a type info against a string generated via type name? In particular, how do we compare an address against a string?
So I guess, again, an area that you're deeply familiar with, I think type name supports both doing structs and primitives, right?
But the struct version has a field that is an address, and so that's why if you're trying to compare a type info versus a type name,
right,
you need to compare an address versus a string.
Well, I was actually proposing, so type name gets the entirety of the address, the colons, the module, and the struct name itself.
Yeah, tag, yeah.
So my suggestion would be if you want to do raw primitives against structs, you're probably going to be best using just the type name call.
Okay, but if someone else has a type info and they want to compare versus our type name, like as an API, do we BCS the address field into and then string split at the colons?
Oh boy, I guess I'd kind of be curious. Are there actually examples of this, or is this more of just a?
Yeah, this is something we're trying to do. Is so storing a type name internally, but if other people want to store type info and they want to do a lookup, we need to verify that their type info equates to our type name. And it's easy to do it if you have the module name and the function name, because those are already strings. But the leading address is an address type, and the address and the type name is still a string. So basically the question is, how do you get from an address to a string?
I mean, that's a great question.
Like, that's why, like, if you could be, maybe you could BCS to bytes it or do something, but
No, because you need to actually you have to make it ASCII.
because then, right, because then the real question, like, because now you have type name, which can convert an address.
So you want address to string,
Basically, that would,
Just a hex string.
to hex string.
yeah, or, yeah, to byte, I guess it would be a byte vector, yeah.
So I mean, in lieu of that, because obviously that's a interestingly non-trivial change at this point in time to the
Okay.
framework. Yeah, so we're slowing down progress in that space, except for, last finishing touches to where we think we need a better hardening. The best option would be to, if you really need this, is to end up supporting 2 indexes.
Okay.
The ideal scenario is that,
Index, okay, so not just have the field be type name, but have the field be type name and also store the corresponding type info.
that might be
you
one
look
way
up
of doing it,
there.
yeah.
Okay, got it, all right, thanks.
Although hopefully that doesn't actually become an issue where we have to support it, but I supporting a service like Econia, I can imagine having the more interfaces, the more generally accessible it is.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Cool.
I think the other question that I had stumbled across was, I think there might be some confusion about what the current status of our networks are. So we have DevNet, which is our actively being developed network. We go and reset that on a weekly basis. We roll out changes. We don't validate backwards compatibility. It's really there to just allow the team to iterate quickly and to not worry about weird things that might be happening inside the network. And also, interestingly enough, it's one of the most accessible networks out there, or was until some interesting stuff happened. But then we have Testnet. And so Testnet is a long-lived network. We really hope that Testnet will be our oldest and longest running network for the entirety of all time, as a means to really validate how users are developing, evolving over time. Obviously, so you don't have to worry about wipes on Testnet. You can build there safe, reliably, thoughtfully. Maybe you're not really happy with the work that you deployed on Testnet, but you can throw it away, create a new account, go to the Faucet and ask for some more money and redeploy your contracts, buy some more fake NFT, or I guess fake NFTs. I don't know. Anyway, Testnet NFTs. You can have fun in there. I think one of the caveats, of course, in a Testnet environment is in a DevNet tokenomics, you got a ticking time bomb of approximately 7 days, at which point your coins are completely lost. In a Testnet, coins take on a different meaning if you can aggregate enough and do weird things with them. And we've actually seen many cases where people have created bots and other things to just go and hammer away at our faucets, which is something we originally had thought would happen in DevNet, which never happened. And then, within days of Testnet, well, our worst nightmare came true where we had to, put emergency software up to go and mitigate or enable people to get a little bit of coin from Testnet. And so that's the biggest and most interesting about Testnet is just the fact that tokenomics of a test network are usually not very well defined and can be very ad hoc-ish. So have fun on Testnet, build on top of Testnet. And if you are having issues, just head over to our aptos.dev/getting started, where we actually have clear guidance on here's how you connect to DevNet and here's how you connect to Testnet.
Yeah.
So that was answering a question on what can we do if addresses keep getting reset on a weekly basis. Any other questions on Twitch?
Let's see, we had, which is the most efficient hash map? Is it a simple map or table or property map?
So I think,
Okay,
I
so.
don't know if you can
So
probably.
this is where gas optimization principles come into play, and I'll note that every entry in a table is considered an item in global storage, and by far the most expensive operation is a per item creation, second by writing to an item, third reading an item. In the traditional table, every entry is considered an item in global storage, which means that every time you add something to the table, you are assessed the largest cost, which is a per item creation. In some of the other ones, you can put multiple elements into a vector, and then that vector blob ends up being a single item in global storage. And then the question becomes how many elements are in your blob and how many bytes in particular are in your blob. So the trade-off is basically that per byte costs are 1/2000th of per item costs. And so assuming you have 2000 or less bytes, it makes sense to combine as many elements as possible into one entry in global storage. So ultimately it depends on your use case. Within any kind of item, for example, if you use like what used to be called big vector, there's something similar in simple map now, I think. If you are borrowing a lot within that, it can change because vector borrows are also costly, but by far the most expensive operation is per item creation. And so if you're minimizing per item creations, then you're going to be keeping your gas costs down. And one particular way of doing this is rather than deallocating unused items in a table is to track a pointer to that and overwrite it in the future instead, rather than create a new one, because that's 1/5 as much gas.
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. I mean, the important thing is that the main idea behind the table is to have very large number of items in a vector. So when the vector gets really large, if you're iterating over the vector to find something, the cost increases dramatically, right? And remember that the gas costs can change over time. So maybe like right now it's worth 2000, maybe it's worth something else later, who knows? But the idea is still the amount of computations you're doing to iterate to a, let's say 10,000 or 20,000 item table, 20 or 10,000 item map, simple map, would be a lot longer than if, say, you use the table, which would do an immediate lookup.
Yeah, and if you know for a fact you're gonna have less than 2000 bytes for right now, it actually makes sense to keep everything in a vector. That is the most efficient. But if you get over that threshold, then your access costs increase linearly with the number of bytes. And so that's an order of K operation, and which is why you would then split it across multiple elements, which in this case ends up being a standard table.
So the one thing that's kind of interesting here, and we've had our own internal debates on in the Aptos Labs team, is you can do really, really complex data storage models on chain, but then you can't easily do lookups without having an index off chain. So you'd have to specifically tell your transaction, go read data at this spot.
That's right. So
versus just being able to do like completely on-chain operations to find the data that you're looking for, like being able to enumerate or identify. So I'm kind of curious how you kind of done that in Aptos.
So there are several solutions for this. The first is implementing a doubly linked list or a singly linked list, so that every item in a table points to another item in the table, either the previous or next, and then your table has to have a head and optionally a tail, depending on if you want to make it a doubly linked list. You could do a stack, for example, which would decrease it, but that can break parallelism. Although I will note that parallelism is not incentivized at all actually by the gas schedule, so there's no reward, I think, for writing parallelism aware code. So adding a head and a tail field to a table, while technically it breaks parallelism, you're not actually assessed any penalty for that. And then additionally, another strategy is to have trees. So you just have a pointer to the root, and then every node within the tree points to either its several of its children. What we're working on right now is actually an optimized version of a crit bit tree with queuing functionality. We're calling it crit queue. And the idea is it tracks the root of the tree, it tracks the head, it also tracks the tail, so that you can do insertions and deletions O1 or from the head and the tail. But now that we have this understanding of the gas schedule, we are additionally going to be allocating nodes only once, and then saving a pointer to unused nodes so that they can later be reinserted into the tree but not reallocated, because that cuts down storage costs by a factor of 5. So one of the important strategies here is to save pointers to inactive nodes and then overwrite them later, rather than deallocate them and reallocate later. And I'll add too, there's not any incentive for deallocation. Actually, there's a penalty for deallocation, but assuming a contract will allocate again in the future, the most efficient thing is to save inactive ones and overwrite them later.
Let's remember that we, in the future, may change the gas schedule. So even though there isn't or at least governments will, like at least right now, like there's no penalty for deallocation, there may be some change to that in the future.
Yeah, and I think that the main principles which appear to be the kind of like foundation of this design is mainly creating new items in global storage is the most expensive thing because this involves an update to a Merkle tree and like allocating something in that Merkle tree. So by far, that's going to be the most costly thing. Once you've already decided you're going to do something in the Merkle tree, making that slightly bigger or larger doesn't have an effect. And this is why per byte costs are much lower than per item.
Right.
Behind that, overwriting additionally is expensive because then you have to modify the write set in the multi-version hash map. And then you additionally have to overwrite within the Merkle tree and recompute some stuff. And that's why writing, because it doesn't have to allocate where in the Merkle tree, it's expensive, but it's not as expensive. And then reading, you're just traversing the tree. And then you're also not doing anything in the multi-version hash map with the incarnation sort of modifications within the VM. So those ratios, while they can change, it seems like they're unlikely to like, per item creation is always going to be most expensive.
Yeah.
Per item writes are always going to be like a fraction of that, and per item is always going to be a fraction of that. And per byte is always going to be much lower than per item.
Yeah, those are general principles that we'll hold still. I mean, even in the case of imagining some sort of kickback for folks that deallocate storage, I've got to imagine even keeping around your own garbage collector inside of the smart contract will probably always be a reasonable path forward, just because of the fact that creation is going to be something that only goes up over time as demand on the system increases. I'm not sure if you look at the storage
Base
curves.
A192 exponential curve. Yeah, so as utilization as a fraction of critical thresholds determines how much gas costs increase above a base amount. And right now for utilization less than 40%, gas costs are going to be between 1 and 1.5 times what they are at Genesis. But for anything above that, they start to increase exponentially to a factor of 100x at the critical threshold. Right now, this is 500 gigabytes and then 1 billion items. And so obviously, like you said, these can change. But the main idea is that in the beginning, it's not much of a penalty. And once you approach a critical limit, it gets drastically more expensive over time.
Yeah. So as you're building out your applications, be thinking about your data storage plans, because that can definitely have a huge impact on the cost of leveraging and building out complex applications, especially like Aconia.
Yeah, and I'll mention too that for the sake of, if anyone's trying to implement a tree, an important takeaway from this is that self-rebalancing can be extraordinarily expensive. Like if you use an AVL tree and you remove, you have to recursively rebalance up to the root in the worst case. And this involves per item writes to everything in the height of the tree, and every per item write is expensive. So that's why, for example, in our case, we've gone with a crypt bit tree, which is not self-rebalancing, but if you can impose some additional constraints around that, for example, you can ensure that you minimize your per item writes.
I cannot wait to read your books.
Great. I think that's enough on gas. It's funny, someone actually called out, that guy said a lot of words.
Useful feedback.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
do you like kind of on that? Do you have any write-ups of this or any links to?
Yeah,
share?
so David already landed a PR of mine, which adds a docgen file for storagegas.move that has internal linking, all these tables, all these equations. There's a second outstanding PR, which adds a doc site, which adds an article page to the Aptos.dev doc site. It's called How Base Gas Works, and there's a section called Optimization Principles at the end, and that is just waiting to land at the moment.
Oh, so it's already up and ready after the
after your
okay.
upgrade to Aptos Framework docs last night. This morning I updated the internal hard link, so it's ready.
Amazing. So yeah, we'll have to share that out on Discord and Twitter once that gets live. I think that's a huge accomplishment. Thank you for providing that.
Thanks, yeah.
Cool. I don't think, you don't have to understand, that's fine.
Community that loves each other.
I know, what a great community, we love our community. All right, I don't see any other new questions, I don't think, in our, in the Twitch. So if anyone has any real quick questions, go ahead and ask them. Otherwise, we have 4 minutes, so we can probably cut it short.
Yeah, we'll give everybody back 4 minutes. We stole 7 minutes in the beginning, so enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you on next Monday. Take care, everyone.